Italy, February 1944. The southern third of Italy is a land which brought itself into the 17th century and could go no further, no matter how the calendar moved. Yet in 1944, the 20th century had thrust its way into the south of Italy. The Allied armies were ashore and had begun a movement up the peninsula. The new era met the old climate. The vital problem of getting men and supplies to the front ran into the old problem of Italy's marshes and rains. The Italian mountains gave aid to the enemy. By controlling the peaks of these mountains, the Germans could direct fire on the Allies below. The only way we could take these heights was to cross the valley floors against perfect observation. The Germans had built strong defensive positions along a line marking the tops of the highest mountains. This was the Gustav Line, and it had completely stopped our advance. The American Fifth Army on the left, the British Eighth Army on the right. Behind the lines, a beachhead at Anzio, a stalemated attempt to flank the Gustav Line. The ground war had ground to a halt. A single position was the key to the whole battle. The position was the Abbey of Monte Cassino. From this dominating height and the hills surrounding it, the Germans could observe every Allied movement. To dislodge these German troops, to break this strong point, a massive air attack was ordered. Some ground and air officers did not feel the decision was tactically sound. Nevertheless, the Air Force complied. Somewhat later, the mediums bombed the town of Cassino. Immediately following the air attack, an artillery preparation was fired. A coordinated attack on Cassino was launched by New Zealanders. On their left, the Americans made ready for an assault. The Germans had not suffered serious military damage. Instead, the rubble, the craters, the piles of stone gave them even better protection than they had had before our bombing and shelling.
Finally, we quit. Nobody says, let's quit. The whole platoon just sticks its face in the dirt. You know when you've had it.
The infantry had done the best it could do. The direct frontal attack on the Gustav line had failed. This way, the cost of winning Italy would be a generation of Americans. The war was again halted while we searched for another way to remove the obstacle of the Gustav line. The ground forces were stalemated at the Gustav line, but the Air Force had won complete superiority in the air. We now outnumbered the German Air Force in Italy by 6-1. The narrow constriction of the Italian peninsula, the bad roads, the few railroads, we would make these hindrances work to our advantage. We would create a problem of supply for the Germans. We would let them sit in the Gustav line, and we would strike. Not frontally, on the ground, at Cassino, but far to the rear, at the German lines of supply. The Air Force would stop the movement of German fuel, food, and troops to the front and strangle their supply. The first blow would be struck by the medium bombers, their prime targets, the railroad bridges over which all German rolling stock must come. Once the railroad bridges had been destroyed, the German supply trains were forced to wait in marshalling yards until the spans were repaired. Now the heavy bombers were sent north to concentrate on the railroad junctions and the thousands of freight cars which had been backed into the marshalling yards. The opening phase of the operation to strangle German supply lines was successful. But the major effort would be made by these men, the pilots of the single-seater fighter bombers. They were to blockade the roads, the railroads, and the sea. It was our intention to cut the German supply tonnage to a third or less. This was a problem for the tactical air forces. Now they took off from our bases in Italy and Corsica, 2 planes every minute. They left the Corsican coast, a few minutes low over water, then the beaches of Italy.
First priority, get rid of the bombs. Targets, small bridges. There was no bomb sight in the P-47, so you'd line up as best you could and let go. Trouble was, you'd black out a little on your pull-up, so you had to get rid of the bomb before you haul back on the stick. We got pretty good at bridges. Once the bombs were gone, down on the deck, look for targets of opportunity. Anything that moved. like railroad trains. After a while, there just weren't any trains running in Italy.
As one flight of planes went out, another came in. Railroad traffic was stopped in central Italy. Then, road traffic was strangled. Up and down the roads to Rome, every vehicle that ventured out ran the risk of destruction.
Every once in a while, Jerry would park his ammo wagons near a house. I felt pretty bad about some of those Italian farmhouses. Finally, there wasn't anything moving on the land except sheep and horses. We'd buzz them a little and head out to sea, go after the shipping. Then there was nothing moving on the sea. After a couple of months, anybody could see what the Air Force had done. I was just a second lieutenant, but you didn't have to be a general to know what this meant. We had run out of targets.
The enemy supply machine was ruined. The Italian road system, the bridges, the railroads, the lifelines of supply had been cut. The Air Force had made its point. We had strangled the enemy.
We'd seen the flyboys going in and out, but the breakthrough was still up to us. We sat around, got ready. Let me tell you something about the infantry. You don't believe anything. Big things, small things. After you've been in combat a while, you don't trust anything but yourself. Maybe some of the guys who've been through it with you. Nothing counts but you and the outfit. All the rest is propaganda. If the Air Force had done a job, thanks. But we'd wait and see. First 1,000 yards were bad. You can strangle their supply, but you can't take away all the shells they already have up there. We kept pushing. You can tell how your outfit's going by how low the men crouch. Low crouch, you're ready to hit the dirt. Half crouch, you're still scared, but moving. But walking straight up, you've made it. And we had made it. Breakthrough. Then we had a look at what the Air Force had done. We rolled past the knocked-out tanks, the busted vehicles, the beat-up supply trains, the broken bridges. I have to say it, those flyboys were okay, Buster. We were willing to readmit them into the United States Army. Well, you know what I mean. The Air Force had opened the road to Rome.
I used to pick up a few extra bucks carrying spears at the Metropolitan Opera. So you might say I learned the Italian temperament before I got to Italy. There they stood clapping, like the second act of Aida had just finished.
Now the bombers carried the fight to the north. Air power had opened all the roads that lead to Rome.
The Air Forces won the skies over Europe, but the fight to invade France is yet to come. More than 1 million ground troops all over England ready themselves and their equipment for the invasion. The Allied Air Forces will deliver the first blow. The military order reads, exploit our air superiority in an area 150 miles around Normandy. Seal off the battlefield. Destroy all bridges, transport, and communications. Interdict German supply. The coast of France. "50 feet above Nazi Europe, looking for Germans." Target ahead, barge traffic on the rivers of France. Waterborne ammunition train. Target ahead, German supply trucks on the roads of France. Ahead, the railways of France, prime mover of all German supply to their coastal defenses. Last week of May, only a few trains a day venture west of Paris. June 6th, 1944. Beaches of France. Ahead, the liberation of Europe. Protecting the beachhead, the Allied Air Forces. The beachhead is so small that it takes only 15 minutes to fly it the long way and 4 minutes to cross it the short way. The battlefield is below. The assault is about to begin. Here is our plan. This is the continent of Europe which we had come to deliver from the Germans. This is the Republic of France on whose soil the issues would be decided. This is the Normandy Peninsula, the battlefield. Our air forces have won the sky above France. Now comes the battle to win the ground. On the right, the Canadians and the British face the German Panzer Group West. In the center and on the left, the 1st United States Army faces the German 7th Army. And in reserve, the American 3rd Army waiting for the breakout. The question is, where should our blow fall? The answer is here, beyond Saint-Lô, the center of the line. "2,000 bombers of the 8th and 9th Air Force are called on to carpet bomb a small rectangle west of Saint-Lô. 2,000 bombers unload in an area of less than 6 square miles. A report from the German 7th Army telephone log, July 25th, 1944. Quote, "At noon, nothing is visible but dust and smoke. My front line looks like the face of the moon. All the forward Panzer Grenadier positions are knocked out. At least 70% of my troops are out of action, dead, wounded, crazed, or numb. The situation is hopeless." End quote. The American infantry waits for the preparation to end. Then the men move out, cautiously, warily, and the infighting begins. Supported by tanks, they move into the small French villages. The German Panzerlehr Division is decimated. The German prisoners are shocked and numbed by the carpet bombings. They say they have never seen anything like it. They have had enough. Too much. Now the 3rd United States Army is committed and pours through the breach. A massive, staggering blow, and the whole character of the war has changed. The war of attrition has become a war of movement. A war on foot has become a war on wheels and wings. The Germans are faced with a desperate decision. The Army staff wants to retreat to the Seine and make a stand. Anchor the line at Paris, make the Allies fight for the city, and give it to them in rubble. But Hitler refuses to retreat. On the morning of August 4th, 1944, he overrides all objections and calls for a counterattack. Here is his plan. The American Third Army is moving rapidly into Brittany. It has a narrow constriction between the sea and Mortain through which its supply route must pass. Hitler's plan is to begin by retaking Mortain. He calls on the last available reserves of German armor and German planes. Once Mortain is taken, the drive can continue to the sea. This will break the American Third Army and force a discontinuation of the whole Allied attack. The German counterattack aims at Mortain. The last German reserves in France, the last bit of offensive power available to the Nazis, is thrown into the desperate effort. The Luftwaffe, almost completely absent since D-Day, makes its first appearance in strength. The 2nd Battalion of the 120th Infantry, sent to Mortain for a rest, takes the point of the German attack. The German drive cuts off the battalion. Our weak forces at Mortain are outnumbered and are forced to fight tanks with grenades and rifles. German tanks envelop Mortain. The crust of American defenses gives way around the city. Mortain falls to the Germans, and a number of Americans are captured. The temptation is to check our Third Army's advance and take defensive action at Mortain. But a subtle strategy presents itself. The German plan offers an opportunity to destroy the whole attacking Nazi army. We devise a counterplan. The German 7th Army is attacking Mortain. We will hold near the city with the 30th Division reinforced and tactical air. Meanwhile, the Americans will run the flank to Argentan, and the British will take Falaise. A whole German army will be broken apart. The plan calls for American and Royal Air Force planes to remove the air cover the Germans have placed above Mortain. American gun sight cameras record the destruction of German planes. The key to the winning of France is the air-ground team. Each of these tank columns is supported by fighter bombers. The war on wheels and the war on wings are tied together by radio. An Air Force officer rides in a tank near the head of each column. When the ground forces run into resistance and are forced to halt, the word is flashed to the Air Force liaison officer. Within moments, the supporting planes are contacted. Air-ground clears the way for encirclement. We have taken a calculated risk and are beginning to close the trap on a whole German army. But the enemy has not yet lost France. Our defenses hold at Mortain. As the American columns move into Argentan, the British proceed towards Falaise to close the trap. But the bulk of German armor faces the British. And in desperation, the Germans withstand the British blow. The inability of the Allies to close the trap gives some German units the chance to escape. General Eisenhower and his staff decide that if the Falaise Gap cannot be closed on the ground, it will be blocked from the air. The British 2nd Tactical Air Force and all available planes of the United States 9th Air Force are ordered to attack the almost encircled German army. Hour after hour, plane after plane is made ready. Hour after hour, plane after plane is armed. Throughout the Allied armies and air forces, there is, for the first time, the sudden realization that the Nazis are trapped in France. The meaning of air superiority, of air power, of control of the sky has never been more clear. These planes will be almost unopposed as they seek out the enemy. Below lies the German 7th Army conducting an orderly retreat. If this army can be annihilated, France will be free. An airplane cannot hold 1 mile of ground, nor can it be represented as a line on a map. But air power can destroy the enemy's armies and break his will to fight. Against 125,000 troops, against 5,000 vehicles, we sent our air might. And after our strikes, the German 7th Army is broken. There can be no stand this side of Paris. The bulk of the tanks and trucks is destroyed within the pocket. The German dead number 10,000. Over 50,000 Germans surrender. The orderly retreat becomes a rout. The German High Command has made its infantry expendable so that its few remaining tanks may retreat to the German border. The German infantry, betrayed and bewildered, overwhelmed and beaten, is led to prisoner of war enclosures. The honor of liberating Paris is given to the Free French. The French tank columns are delayed along the road by celebrations at every small town and village. The French are understandably slower than they might have been. In Paris, the FFI, the Maquis, the whole underground, the whole city arises. Paris is ready for liberation. Frenchmen take up guns hidden since 1940. The streets are barricaded. As the Germans retreat, the Parisians strike at them. Every rifle, every grenade is needed. The French fight within the city and wait for the armored columns to arrive. On the 24th of August, 1944, Allied tanks enter Paris. The barricades come down. After 4 years, Paris is French again. In war, most days are filled with filth and destruction. Most days are days out of one's life. But this is a day with meaning. This is the day Paris is free.
This is the German V-2 rocket. When fired, it will arc 55 miles above the Earth. It will hit the ground at 2,500 miles an hour. There is no known defense against it. The first 2 weeks of December are spent in repositioning 1,000 of these weapons. None is fired, but the launching sites are ready. This is the situation map of December 15th, 1944. The Allied armies have drawn up to the German border and are awaiting supplies before their attack is continued. The Germans know of a weak spot in the American lines, here in the Ardennes forest. The Germans plan to bulge through the Ardennes and then sweep to Antwerp, the sole port of supply for the Allied northern armies. If Antwerp falls, 4 Allied armies will be cut off. The Germans call this plan Watch on the Rhine. The Americans will call it the Battle of the Bulge. While a low fog shrouds the rear area, the Germans move forward. December 16th, 1944. The V-2s are launched against Antwerp. Buzz bombs, V-1s.
7,000 German guns opened fire against part of the American positions in the Ardennes. The American lines break open. The Germans have achieved complete surprise. In the first 2 days, they advanced 20 miles. The Germans take 7,000 American prisoners from one American division alone. The American dead now number over 2,000. The German drive moves toward Antwerp. Antwerp staggers under the rocket attack. The V weapons are inaccurate. Only 5% of the rockets and bombs land on the port of Antwerp. The rest fall in the business and residential areas of the city. Fog protects the German advance from Allied air power. The Germans move toward the Meuse River. One city which should fall does not. Bastogne. It is an important road junction, and unless it is taken, the German drive will be constricted. Within Bastogne, American cooks, bakers, and paratroopers fight as infantrymen. The Germans send 3 divisions against Bastogne. The city is surrounded, and German armor grinds into the outskirts. Bastogne calls for help. Allied air power is snowbound and fogbound. The few planes that get off the ground cannot find the battlefield. And when they return, for 7 days, the bulge expands. On December 23rd, the fog lifts, the sun breaks out, and the German army knows that the Allied air forces will soon appear. The planes of the 9th Troop Carrier Command are over Bastogne. troops and supplies come into the bulge by glider. The bulge is reinforced. Under air cover, the British and American ground forces compress the bulge and wipe it out. In February, the Siegfried Line is breached and the Allied armies spill into the flat Rhineland. The Germans blow their bridges and retreat behind the Rhine for what the Allies feel will be the Germans' last stand. The American advance is so swift that the bridge at Remagen is captured before the Germans can destroy it. The last natural barrier in Germany is breached. To the north, the second wing of the envelopment comes from the air. Eisenhower, Montgomery, and Bradley must make a decision. The British argue that for post-war peace in Europe, the capture of Berlin by the Allies instead of the Russians is a necessity. But the Americans prefer to destroy the German armies still in the field. Thus, the British and Canadian effort continues in the north, and the Americans and French shift toward the center and the south. Nazi Germany disappears piecemeal. April 10th, 1945. To aid the Russian advance on Berlin, 1,200 American bombers are airborne. This is the last strategic bombing of the war. Its targets, the few jet factories still remaining, and the headquarters buildings of the German army. There are 1,000 miles between Moscow and Berlin. The Red Army has covered them all. The Soviets move into the German capital. The Russians take the city block by block, street by street, hole by hole. Flamethrowers arc from apartment to apartment. On April 25th, the 1st United States Army and the 1st Ukrainian Army meet at the River Elbe. One minute after 11, May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe. Allied air power had defeated German air power a year before the Allied armies defeated the German armies. When the German Air Force broke, this is what Germany lost. Germany lost her oil. Her refineries and cracking plants were destroyed from the air. Without oil, Germany lost her air power. Germany lost her submarine manufacture. Without submarines, Germany lost her sea power. Germany lost her transportation net. Without transportation, Germany lost her ground power. Most of all, Germany lost her industrial plants. Without industry, Germany lost the war. On May 9th, 1945, freedom returned to Western Europe. Vengeance to the villains and the collaborators. Those who live through the war shall always carry the scars of war. Now begins the long journey home. Message received in code at Pearl Harbor. Quote, from Chief of Naval Operations, Washington, D.C., to Commander, Pacific Fleet. This dispatch is to be considered a war warning. Diplomatic negotiations between the United States and Japan have ceased, and an aggressive move by Japan is expected in the next few days. Execute an appropriate defensive deployment. End quote. November 26, 1941, message received in code at Pearl Harbor. Quote, from Chief of Army War Plans to Army Commander Oahu. Negotiations with Japan seem to be terminated. Japanese future action unpredictable, but hostile action possible at any moment. Subversive activities may be expected. End quote. Japanese secret message intercepted and later translated in Washington. Quote, from Japanese Foreign Office Tokyo to Japanese Consulate Hawaii. Strictly secret, please investigate comprehensively the American fleet bases in the neighborhood of the Hawaiian military reservation. End quote. Japan, November 25, 1941, 0900 hours. The Japanese strike force rendezvous in Tonkam Bay in the Kuriles. Final reinforcements arrive, bringing 6 aircraft carriers to full strength. All ships are made combat ready. Oh, 600 hours, November 26, 1941. The ships of Carrier Divisions 1 and 2 leave the Kuriles for Pearl Harbor. Order of the day, bow to the homeland, pay respect to the Emperor. American Naval Combat Intelligence at Pearl Harbor reports it has lost track of Japanese aircraft carrier divisions 1 and 2. American intelligence assumes Japanese carriers are on late fall maneuvers in Japanese home waters. Message received from Admiral Yamamoto in Japan. Quote, climb Mount Niitaka, end quote. Its meaning, proceed with attack. December 5th, message received from Tokyo to Japanese consulate in Honolulu. Quote, we have been receiving reports from you on ship movements. In future, please report even when there are no movements, end quote. Message intercepted and decoded in Washington. December 6th, position of Japanese carrier force, 490 miles north of Pearl Harbor. Japanese admiral expresses gratitude for bad weather. Night approach to Pearl will be masked by fog. Battleship recognition. Identify the ships of the United States fleet. I don't know. You should know this shape as well as you know your wife's. A toast is drunk in all wardrooms and messes. Good luck and success.
Each of the attacking airplanes carries in its cockpit a small shrine, emblematic of the famous Yasukuni Shrine. The pilots dedicate their planes with sake. Midnight, December 6. The commander of the Pacific Fleet has received a report that the Japanese consulate is burning papers under the cover of night. No steps are taken. December 7, 0400 hours. Position of the Japanese strike force, 250 miles north of Pearl Harbor. All pilots of Carrier Divisions 1 and 2 are ordered to be awakened. The alert status of the United States Pacific Fleet, early Sunday morning, December 7, 1941. Almost the entire fleet, excluding the carriers and their escorts, is moored at Pearl Harbor. But no American barrage balloons are flying, no torpedo baffles are set, there is no reconnaissance screen, no offshore patrols. 50% of all personnel are on shore leave. It is your duty to Japan to strike an enemy of our nation. We attack the United States because the United States would subvert Japan. Japan expects each pilot to do his duty. Your mission is divine. You fly for the Emperor. The orders are clear. Carry them out.
The Japanese navigators use station KGMB, Honolulu, as a zeroing point for their radio compasses. The Honolulu radio station unwittingly serves as a homing beacon to guide the Japanese attackers toward Pearl Harbor. Oh, 700 hours, the anti-torpedo net protecting the United States fleet at Pearl Harbor is unexplainedly left open. 0712 hours. There now exists a decoded message from the United States destroyer Ward announcing that it has attacked a Japanese submarine in the harbor. No decisive action is taken pending confirmation. 0717 hours. An American private using an experimental radar set telephones that he has picked up an unknown flight of 50 planes heading south into Oahu. The Air Corps officer receiving the private's report disregards the message. 0740, the Japanese planes are ordered to drop into the passes of the mountain range to escape detection. Oh, 0755 hours. The first wave of Japanese planes attacks Hickam Field to keep the American Air Corps from mounting a counterattack. Japanese strikes are also aimed at Bellows and Wheeler Fields. The Naval Air Station at Ford Island and the Marine Air Station at Awa are also struck. Of Hawaiian land-based air power is destroyed in 20 minutes. Oh, 0757 hours. The major strike against the primary target begins. Battleship Row, 8 capital ships, the backbone of the Pacific Fleet. 7 of 8 battleships are sunk or seriously damaged. In 1 hour and 45 minutes, Japan becomes the leading naval power in the Pacific. The Japanese success is beyond their expectations. They do not know how well they have succeeded, for the Hawaiian Islands could have been invaded directly after this attack. Another fact the Japanese do not know, the attack at Pearl Harbor has erased the great debate on America's participation in World War II. For the United States of America now speaks with a single voice, and that voice says,
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
In 1941, naval strategists measure the strength of a navy by counting its battleships. The battleship strength of the United States Pacific Fleet is destroyed at Pearl Harbor. Almost unnoticed at the time, none of the burning ships is an aircraft carrier. The American aircraft carriers are on the high seas between Pearl Harbor and Midway. 0840 hours, December 7th. Message from Hawaii radio to Guam, Midway, Wake to the Philippines. This is not an exercise. Japan has attacked Pearl Harbor. The Japanese plan of attack calls for simultaneous strikes at Pearl Harbor and the Philippines. Bad weather delays the Philippines strike for 9 hours. The Japanese expect they will have to fight their way into Clark Field, the main Air Force base in the Pacific. The American commanders in the Philippines have been unable to decide on a course of action. The American bombers are on the ground as the Japanese come in. Clark Field lies open, vulnerable. Hours after the Pearl Harbor warning, American air power in the Pacific is destroyed on the ground. Now the Japanese perimeter explodes through the Pacific. Without anything but token resistance from the remnants of Allied air power and sea power, the enemy seizes control of the South China Sea, the Sea of Java, and the seas of the East Indies. The Japanese army plunges into Southeast Asia. One after another, supposedly impregnable Allied fortresses fall to the enemy. The British Army surrenders at Singapore. With the fall of Singapore, the Japanese achieve domination of Southeast Asia. Only one battle moves slowly, the battle against the American army in the Philippines. On Bataan, the Japanese pressure is relentless. The Japanese take Manila in January of 1942. The enemy takes Bataan and aims at the last refuge of the Americans, Corregidor, an island in the Bay of Manila. Corregidor is invaded. May 6, 1942, the final surrender of the American army in the Philippines. The defeated Americans began a death march to prison camps. The Japanese Empire has won the war it set out to fight. The Japanese perimeter covers 20 million square miles of the earth. The Japanese military estimated 1 year to conquer the South Pacific. It has taken only 6 months. A small clique points out that Japan has won everything for which she went to war. It is suggested that Japan offered to negotiate peace with the United States. But the Japanese Navy rules the military, and the Japanese Navy has an inflexible doctrine, symbolized by the doors of the Admiral Togo Shrine. Togo, who in 1905 defeated the Russians in one classic naval battle, has left this military axiom: destroy the enemy's fleet in one decisive battle. The commanders of the Imperial Navy argue that the United States Navy must be forced into a last decisive battle. Since the Americans have lost their battleships and since Japan may choose the point at which she will attack, this battle cannot be anything but a victory for Japan. This is the Japanese plan. The objectives are Midway and the destruction of the United States fleet. A later objective is Hawaii. The key to the Hawaiian Islands is Midway. The opening phase will be a surprise attack at Midway, where the Japanese expect only light resistance. The American fleet is expected to steam toward Midway after the Japanese strike. The two fleets will engage in a classic sea battle. And since the Japanese have superiority in battleships and aircraft carriers, the American fleet will be destroyed. The naval cadets at Itajima are told, "We have won the battle so far, but the enemy is not yet beaten. The opponent is still strong. We must meet them in one decisive struggle. You will be called upon. You must prepare yourself." The essence of a surprise attack is secrecy, and Japanese security has been compromised because the Japanese secret codes have been broken by the Americans. All messages sent to the Imperial Japanese fleet are falling into American hands. The successful decoding of the Japanese messages is the greatest intelligence victory of the war. Midway will be prepared. On the basis of the intercepted messages, the United States Pacific Fleet begins to take up defensive positions near Midway. The Empire of Japan has not lost a naval battle in 300 years. The Japanese fleet will be at Midway, numerically superior in all classes of ships. But their intelligence is faulty. The Japanese believe the main strength of the American fleet is still in Hawaii or in Australian waters. The Japanese believe their attack on Midway will be a complete surprise. Hidden behind a bad weather front, the Japanese fleet moves to Midway. Midway is prepared as Pearl Harbor was not. Although the Marines are outnumbered, the island is on the alert. The Air Force sends as many B-17s to Midway as the island can handle. A force of 17 heavy bombers is gathered on the island. Within a few hours after the planes arrive, they are ordered into the air to make long-range searches. Although we know the Japanese are coming, we do not know exactly where they are. Early in the morning of June 4th, 1942, the decisive contact is made. Enemy carriers are reported. Enemy planes are seen inbound toward Midway. Bombers cause some damage to shore installations, but the attack does not succeed. If the Japanese are to soften up Midway, they must strike again. Midway is still secure. Admiral Nomura knows he must launch a stronger attack against the island, but if he is to strengthen his attack force, he must use his reserves. The Japanese reserve planes are armed with torpedoes. If they are to attack Midway, bombs must be substituted for torpedoes. The Japanese admiral does not know that the American carriers are in the vicinity. He orders the change from torpedoes to bombs. While the change in weapons is being made, the Japanese carriers are vulnerable to air attack. This is the turning point of the Pacific War. Suddenly, overhead appear the carrier-based planes of the United States Pacific Fleet. Dive bombers penetrate the Japanese fighter screen, penetrate the Japanese anti-aircraft screen, and catch the enemy carriers. 5 minutes after the attack begins, two great Japanese carriers, Akagi and Soryu, lie broken in the water. 5 minutes after the attack begins, American naval aircraft assert their dominance over the surface ships. The orthodox naval doctrine of a battleship war is destroyed by air power. The Imperial fleet gathers for one last effort. On the enemy carrier, hear you, are the remnants of Japan's first-line naval pilots. They are told, at all costs and with all sacrifice, attack the American carriers. Meanwhile, the American planes are returning. 2 American torpedo squadrons have been wiped out, and the survivors, low on gasoline, have difficulty finding their ships. The Japanese planes are only a few miles behind the Americans. As the enemy is sighted, the American planes are waved off. The Japanese attack is gallant and persistent. The Yorktown is hit. Damage control parties fight to save the ship. Then the Japanese torpedoes come in. The United States will lose the Yorktown, but the Japanese will lose 200 of their best pilots, a blow from which the Japanese Navy will never recover. suddenly as the attack began, it is over. The surface ships of both fleets have not exchanged one shot. Midway remains American. After Midway, there is no direction the Japanese perimeter can move except to retreat toward Tokyo. After Midway, the airman is the first line of naval attack and the first line of naval defense. After Midway, the airplane and the aircraft carrier control the seas.